Morning, everybody. This is not a get ready with me in the morning video. I know people have been doing that on Instagram, but I just think that that would be weird and nobody is interested in watching me put on makeup. But it is the half hour before I start working, and so I have a time frame for this, and this is not going to be long. So what we're going to talk about is Garcia's Coup de la glotte. And what I'm wanting to do right up front is to say what our goals are and why we do it. And then if those are not your goals and you already do it or whatever, then you don't need to watch the rest of this video, right? So we're talking about clean onset. And what does that mean? What are our goals, right? Whichever way you do it. What is the goal of the good onset? Hello. So the goal is you want to start on the pitch, right? I mean, that is what we believe the good goals of onset are. On the pitch, with immediacy of vowel or consonant, but in this case vowel because we're talking about like singing it, especially in exercises, and then applying like the vowel onset. With immediate vibrancy of tone, right? We're talking about like classical singing at this point, so no straight tone. Immediate vibrancy of pitch, that's not going to change during the course of the note, and at the intended dynamic, right? So on the pitch, immediate vowel, immediate vibrancy, and in the intended dynamic. That is like the basic goal with that. So if those are not your goals in onset, you can just like get right over to like another Instagram video, which will talk about different things that might interest you more. Why? So why do we think this is important? Because when you start singing in this way, it sounds like you mean what you're saying, right? You're not pussyfooting around getting in there. I think it's totally akin to what Kala says when she says, well, you imagine saying something and then you say it with conviction to the audience, right? If you start like in the intended dynamic on the pitch with the correct vowel immediately, then you sound like you came to say something that you mean, right? You're not searching for something. Somebody said to one of my singers the other day, I don't like it when you sound like you're searching for something. I don't like it either, right? You want to sound that you're speaking with conviction. Why is that? What are other reasons we like it? It's clean phonation, right? It helps you like not get air through the sound. Why you don't want air through the sound? Because you don't have a microphone to amplify that airy sound of yours, right? The tone has to be clean and it has to be sonorous. It has to have resonance. It must not be diffused by air because it will not carry in a large house, right? If you have issues with staying or even finding your natural vibrato, it's useful to do a good clean onset because the voice will vibrate, be in vibrato, be in spin at a laryngeal level. Right? Like our friend Jack Levine says, like, you cannot vibrate your air. You're not trying to vibrate your air. You're not trying to make a sound vibrate, right? When we're talking, you're also not trying to wobble your air. You're also not trying to trill your larynx, right? This is like all about having that kind of naturalness of vibrancy of tone that when we say, Ken Bozeman says, describes it so beautifully. He says, you experience the vibrato as movement in the pitch, not of the pitch. Okay, if you put it in voce vista, the pitch moves a little, but it moves a little enough that we only perceive one pitch. So those are the goals, right? That why do I want that? I want a clean sound that sounds like I know what I'm saying and I have intent. My phonation is clean, there's not air blowing through my chords, so I can be heard over the orchestra, and the vibrato is set in motion immediately, okay? So this is not really about like what I believe. This is about like one of like the fathers of Garcia, one of the fathers of Bel Canto Bootcamp, which is Garcia. Now, again, if you have other ways of accomplishing a clean onset, I am all for it, right? There are different ways of talking about these things. There are different language ways of explaining it that might have a similar or exactly the same effect. But so the purpose here is not semantics. The purpose here is just to say what that goal is and then how Garcia describes it. So again, if you have other ways, other systems in place, If you're like, okay, when I walk into a coaching, every onset is really all of those things on the pitch, with the vibrato, with the intent of the sound, that is the dynamic, and the vibrato is immediately available, all of those things, then I'm not talking to you. But I'm talking to you if you are a singer that very often gets stopped in a coaching, be like, that wasn't not a good onset, right? Okay, if you're lucky, you get stopped in your coaching because it's not a good onset. I hear shitty onsets everywhere I go, right? In the biggest opera houses around the world, you hear poor onsets. People are not caring about that stuff so much, right? They're like, well, we'll just kind of get in it and then like follow the phrase and then get to like a big high note, right? But I really want to make a note. Birgit Nilsson official joined. Oh, if only it was Birgit Nilsson. How amazing would that be? Hi, it's good to see you. Okay, so what does Garcia say? And let me just say, I myself, like many people of my age and younger and older, all of us have gone through this idea that the sound follows the air. I was brought up like that. That is what I knew to be the truth. But I also want to talk to people who are like, oh, well, I've always known the truth, because like sometimes you can define your ideas in a better way as you learn more, as you read more. Also, as coaches, we tend to like not talk about it unless it's not good, right? So I'm not going to, when you walk into a coaching, I'm not going to be like, okay, let's do onsets. Well, people I know well, maybe we will do that, right? If you trust me to help you do that. But again, it is something that we have to talk about if the singer is in a coaching and cannot achieve a clean onset, right? I worked on Aida yesterday, and God help you if you cannot really sing a good onset on there are so many phrases that's really exposed. Okay, so as I thought it also when I wrote the Vakai project, right, when I wrote those parts about like onset, it's like, how can I write it in a way that it's accessible to everybody? The people who think that I can find like from an H, but then take away the H. And so that's in there and all of this. But like eventually you want that clear sound, because there's not an H in Italian. There's also not an H in German. If you say, an die ferne Geliebte, yeah, because there is one when you start with house, right? When you're like, I'm talking to house. I see he's here. So when we have those problems, that's when we have to talk about it. So I went back to Garcia because I also grew up with the idea that the glottal onset or coup de la glotte is bad for you. That has been part of like vocal lines, vocal worlds for a long, long time, right? And since that idea came into play, I would say a lot of things changed because of that. We do tend to get slightly looser phonation, a little more airy sound, a little more vibrato issues. So it's like, okay, who is the father of the coup de la glotte? He is the horse we have to go to, right? He got a lot of flack for it, but what did Garcia say about it when he coined that term? Now, other people talked about the glottis before, but like this idea of coup de la glotte, like as a rule, we always refer to Garcia. And so I went back to Garcia. I put on a picture of like the original French, but for the purpose of today, I will use the Pashka translation, which is what most people use. The Pashka translation of the original, I think it's the 1847 version. Okay. The sentence where he describes it really clearly what he perceives it to be. He says the following words. It is necessary to prepare the stroke of the glottis by closing it, which stops and momentarily accumulates some air in the passage. Then, much as a rupture operates as a means of relaxation, one opens it with an incisive and vigorous stroke. There comes the word stroke, similar to the action of the lips in energetically pronouncing the consonant B, like saying pa or ah, right? He says, then also this stroke also resembles the action of the palatal arc performing the movement when you say the K, ka, pa, ka, a. Now, when you think about that, first, let's just clarify what the glottis is, right? The glottis is the opening between the vocal cords. That is called the glottis. When you close the glottis, you bring the arytenoids together, right? If I have all of my words right? The arytenoids pinch together, the cords are closed. What are you now not doing? You are now not breathing. Okay, so we do this, and this is what we often say. It is a natural thing how we go from breathe to speak on a daily basis. Whether you are speaking softly or loudly, when you are waking up in the morning and you go, oh God, another day that it's snowing. Oh God, you have gone from breathing to speaking by closing the glottis because you are no longer breathing. We don't breathe while we speak, right? Like we either breathe or we speak or we make sound, right? Or I can be very excited and go like, I'm so excited, right? In that moment, I am making a glottal onset. So if you want to say, well, the air comes first or the air precedes the sound, which is what I heard a lot when I was younger, you're like, okay, is the air the sound? You have to start to think about that, right? But what we know for a fact is that in order to start phonating, the chords have to come together. Unless you have like dysphonia, right? Like there's what is that? Maybe somebody can put in comments. What is it called when like the chords won't come together in speech and you go, like, right, you're kind of blowing air through the chords, trying to get them to come together, right? But that is not how we normally, if you don't have any vocal injuries, if you don't have paralysis of the vocal fold, that's not how you start to make a sound. You like breathe and you're like, as my friend Steve Austin says, my colleague, well-respected voice teacher says, awesome onset. Americans love saying awesome. When I'm in Germany, I tend to use Entschuldigung. Yeah. When I'm talking to South African singers, I say Icona or Aish. Yeah. Words you can find in any of your language. Find what is the word that starts on a vowel that you say cleanly every day. Right. And so that is what we're trying to find. Now, the part of Garcia's line, I think that screws people over and makes them afraid, is this: it stops and momentarily accumulates some air in the passage. That is, there is a little build of pressure. Now, that might scare you because you don't want to think about air pressure, you don't want to think about pressure, you don't want to think about holding your breath, all of those things, right? All of those words are key words that I, through my life, have heard. You cannot hold, do not hold your breath. Do not let excessive pressure build. Do not, those are the main ones that I hear all the time, right? But what do we do when we say that calmly in a very simplistic way? There is a little pressure because it is the difference of pressure underneath the vocal folds and above the vocal folds that makes the thing happen, that makes sound, right? If it's just if it's just the same amount of air pressure on both sides of that thing, there ain't no sound happening. You're just breathing. It's like an open thing. Above and below the glottis is the same amount of air pressure. So the fact of the matter is that in order to phonate, a little pressure is created. Now, does it have to freak you out? Does it freak you out when you say awesome? It doesn't freak me out. Now, if you need to do it in a specific place and you go 3, awesome, and you have to do it in exactly a good place, right? To like sing with the music. Not that I care so much if it's exactly together all the time, but that's another topic. But if you have to do that, you have to coordinate that. Now, that is where people come when we say, so let's break down what people normally have as possible onsets. There are people who say you first put air through the chords and then the air makes the chords come together. That's kind of what happens in that kind of dysphonia example of mine, right? You go, like you kind of have air moving and then you interrupt that process of breathing out by beginning to make sound. To me, that doesn't seem very efficient if you have to like start, I don't know how many, 850 phrases in Aida, right? Because that's like a lot of complication when you start to think about how you're going to start to sing. Then there's what I grew up with it being called the coordinated onset. I think in America people call it the balanced onset, which is the idea that the chords you will achieve chord closure and the breath will meet the chords at exactly the same time. It will be coordinated. And that is really kind of like where I was when I was a young person, right? Because that is what I heard all the time. You're just going to somehow it's going to happen exactly the same time. And then and when you sing, it also has to happen also at the time when the conductor puts his baton down. So that all seems like a lot of moving parts to get things. So doesn't it seem just a little easier to just close the glottis, as Garcia says, allowing the very momentary build-up of the pressure, and then open the glottis. And you guys, this to me is like the genius of Garcia, because we who have been taught to be afraid of like the terrible glottis that will just kill your voice, we are talking like, well, it's very dangerous to like slam your chords together and go, right. But he does not say to do that. In fact, earlier on, if you want to read Pashka, I'm in page 42 of Pashka, and in the original Garcia that's on IMSLP, I think it's on page 9. He says, one must guard against confusing the stroke of the glottis with the coup de poitrine, the stroke of the chest, which resembles a cough or the effort of expelling something which is obstructing the throat. That is when you build excessive pressure and you go, right? So the stroke of the chest, different than the stroke of the glottis for Garcia. This all kind of became mangled together in the modern world as like, I don't know, danger, don't do any of these things. But if you go to page 42, it's very clear what the idea is, right? He says the stroke of the chest causes the loss of a large portion of the breath, and it makes the voice sound aspirated, stifled, and uncertain in intonation. I want to add to that it's very important to understand that the glottal closure, the glottis can be closed both in mode 1 and in mode 2, right? You can go or excuse my voice, which is not as great as all of the people who's on this call. So you don't have to do a glottal onset in chest and go can you hear that on a recording? Of course you can, right? It's not an exact science. But if you sing like non credea starts on chest. But if you sing, say, in Aida, this C5 is in head voice, you're not going to feel, of course not. That will sound horrible. Also, like, might that happen like once in a blue moon because you're tired? Yes, of course, things happen. And all those things that happen are recorded, especially now. But you can achieve glottal closure before singing in head voice. Because you can start in head voice, right? The larynx can be tilted into mode 2, into like again, immediately, right? You can achieve head voice. Mode 1, chest voice. Mode 2, head voice. Sometimes I get confused. Chest dominance, head dominance. You can go that can be achieved, right? And both of those, the glottis closes, and then I love this line so much. Much as a rupture operates as a means of relaxation, in fact, that is, you've opened it with an incisive and vigorous stroke. The stroke for Garcia is not the closure. That is the setup. And then the stroke is no, of course it doesn't say open. It opens and closes 440 or 880 or like a shit ton of times, right? That's the whole point, is it opens and closes. But the point is it starts from closed chords. The phonation starts from the chords being closed, the chords not being open and somehow being prayed into togetherness, right? Does that make sense? And I just think that he is so friggin' good when he explains it. He's also such a genius when he says it's like saying pa or ka. because, like, you've heard this expression, right? That you can imagine the lips of the vocal folds, chords, they used to call like folds, the vocal folds, as like the lips of the voice, right? I hear people say that. I know that to be like a thing, and it makes sense, right? It's like lips here, and you go, ah, and you, like, it articulates here. Like, I like that idea. It's very clever for him to say it's like saying pa, because these are the other lips of your voice, right? The articulatory lips. And if you have that tiny little build, pa, pa, it feels the same as ah, ah. Or if you put the palatal arc, right, as he says, when you say ka, 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 because what does P and K do? Exactly like the closure of the glottis, it momentarily stops the air so that the pa sound emerges from that. So, I don't know, is there anything important that he says? He also, let me just read, because, like, y'all, it's important that we go back to those again. If you have perfect onset, you know, I don't care to remake you if you're perfect. But if you have problems with this, it's useful to think about this very amazing person who was so smart in writing up so many things. Other people write about it as well, but I'm telling you, like, Garcia writes about things almost better than anyone else. It's just true. And so it's useful. It's useful to go back. And as the video that we put out yesterday, it's something you can hear. So Francis, who made that video, decided to add the word click, like when you hear the voice, like, click on, right? It's like it goes from silence into sound, like, immediately. Doesn't have to be loud. Shouldn't be loud if it's not supposed to be loud. Should be loud if it's supposed to be loud, right? In the intended dynamic, in the expression of it. I hate a glottal onset that makes it sound shitty, right? That makes it sound unelegant. Yes, under huge moments of, like, drama, do we sometimes hear, oh, like, really, really pronounced? Yes, of course. But that is for that moment. But if you sing, oh, non credo, or whatever those pitches are, you want to be in the spirit of the music, right? It's just, he's so smart. Okay, I read one more sentence and then I have to go and work. One will take care not to slur the tones before arriving at the correct intonation, which furthermore one should never seek with the voice, but always approach boldly. Stop the scooping. Stop with the scooping, y'all. Like, it's terrible for the music. Can you imagine any pianist, like, starting like playing multiple notes before the note we're supposed to hear, or other instruments? No, don't. We have got to stop it, right? After an adequate preparation, one will attack the tone accurately, incisively, purely, and sonorously. Is that the way to pronounce that word? Sorry, I'm not English. With the stroke of the glottis. I mean, that is it. Accurately, incisively, purely, sonorously. And that comes back to, right, on the pitch, with the immediate vowel, with immediate vibrancy, in the intended dynamic, in the expression of the music. That is what we are searching for. And search for it however you want. I find in my studio that Garcia's way just works like a charm. So you can practice by saying awesome, or eish, or icona, or Entschuldigung, or Achtung, or whatever words you want to say, or like says somebody. You can also, one of my singers who works with very young singers, use to, like, feel what that feels like. Right? Just very, very calm. Go through your day, think about how you do it. And then Derek sometimes says, it's like when you're trying to get a word in when somebody's talking and you're like, excuse me, or I say if you're calling a waiter, right, and you're just waiting to catch his eye, you go like, Entschuldigung. It is possible to close your glottis without going into distress. Nobody told you to press air underneath that, right? Maybe the most important thing that I have not said yet is that this is the idea of the Italian idea of singing sul fiato, not with the air. Sul fiato, on the air, not with the air, right? It's an amazing thing. Sometimes I say to my singers, what happens at the glottis? It's like the air is turned into sound. It's like water into wine. It's an amazing thing that happens. Sound is not air, right? If you've ever seen anyone do the trick of singing in front of a candle, like if you sing well without any air coming through your chords, like the flame, it does not waver. Why? Because it's not air, it's sound. When will the flare waver? If you say house or Houston, right? Then, because that is air that's making that consonant come through. But then when the phonation is clean, the air does not move. So that is the idea of sul fiato. You are not singing by pulsing air through your chords. You are singing in clean, good glottal closure in all dynamics and in all registers. Yeah, all. I have got to work. I have 4 minutes to get on Zoom. Enjoy your practice. Have clean onsets. Find it whichever way works for you, right? This Garcia's way is just a tried and trusted way that we use. But you do you, but good, clean onsets. Sing like you know what you want to say and you are not searching for your sound in the moment of onset. Bye. I will see you. Put comments. I will post this later also. Okay. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.